That night, the house felt different. Not lighter, not simple, just honest. The kind of honesty that comes after something has broken open and nothing inside is pretending anymore. The sun had disappeared hours ago. Chicago glowed beyond the windows in scattered gold and white. Traffic moved. Sirens somewhere distant. The city continuing its endless conversation with itself. Inside the house, quiet lived differently now. Not tension. Not waiting. Rest. Yewande stood alone in the kitchen, bare feet against the hardwood floor, one hand resting unconsciously against her stomach. She had not done it intentionally at first, but sometime in the last hour, her hand had simply stayed there, as if her body already understood something her mind was still catching up to. She looked around the room. The same kitchen, the same counters, the same coffee machine Mong had touched every morning, the same table where wounds had been made and repaired, not fully, but honestly. She poured herself warm tea. No caffeine. She smiled slightly at the adjustment. Small things changing already. Behind her, footsteps. Slow. Familiar. Wang entered wearing soft gray sweats and a black t-shirt. No jacket. No organization. No armor. Just him. He stopped when he saw her standing there. His eyes moved to her hand resting against her stomach. Something changed in his face every single time he remembered. Not surprise anymore. Wonder. Still wonder. He crossed the kitchen. He stood behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Carefully, like he already believed she was carrying something sacred. His chin rested lightly against her shoulder. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence between them had never required filling. After a while, he said quietly, "I still cannot believe it." Yewande smiled. "You have said that 6 times tonight. I know. And yet you keep sounding surprised." "I am surprised." She leaned back into him. "You thought it would never happen." He was quiet. Long enough that she felt the truth of it before he said it. "Yes." She turned slightly, looked at him. "Because of my mother?" "Partially. But not entirely." He looked down briefly, then back at her. "Because I watched what it did to you." The room softened around the words. "I watched you sit through appointments and questions and subtle judgment and people acting like your body was a puzzle to solve." His hand moved over hers, resting there, together. "And every time it hurt you, I hated it more." Yewande looked at him carefully. "You never said that." "I know." "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Took me a while to learn that silence is not always strength." She studied him. This man. This complicated, careful man. The one who had learned control before vulnerability. The one who had spent his life managing danger and still somehow never lost gentleness. "You learned today," she said quietly. "Yes." He did not defend himself. Did not soften it. Just yes. He kissed her shoulder. Soft. Slow. Then he said, "I keep thinking about our child." She smiled. "You just found out 4 hours ago." "I know. And you are already planning." "I always plan." She laughed softly. "What are you planning?" He thought for a second. "Protection." She turned. Fully now, facing him. "Our child will not need protecting from everything." "No," he said. "But they will never question whether they are wanted." The words landed. Deep. She looked at him. Really looked. And understood where that came from. Not adoption. Not secrets. Something older. The quiet fear of a child who learns love can sometimes feel conditional. She touched his face. "They will know." He closed his eyes briefly beneath her hand. "They will know," she repeated. He nodded, then opened his eyes again. "You know what scares me?" "What?" "That I already love someone I have never met." She smiled. "That is the job description." He looked down again. At her stomach. Still flat beneath the dress. Still early. Still private. Still impossible and real at the same time. "I think I need it today," he said quietly. "All of it." Yewande waited. To understand what stays. The kitchen was warm. The lights dim. The world smaller now. Just them. "What stays?" she asked. He looked at her. "You." No hesitation. No complexity. Just truth. You stayed through everything. She tilted her head slightly. I was never leaving. I know. But knowing and understanding are different things. He touched her face. You stayed when my family became difficult. You stayed when my world became dangerous. You stayed when people underestimated you. His expression softened. And you never once became smaller. She smiled slightly. I told you. I do not do smaller. No, he said quietly. You don't. He kissed her then. Slow. Not urgent. Not desperate. Just full. The kind of kiss built from surviving something together. The kind that says we are still here. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. We should go to bed, she said. You are tired. You sound like someone who has already become protective. I am. She smiled. Dangerous. He smiled back. Yes. They turned off the kitchen lights together. Walked upstairs. The hallway dim. Soft pools of light against the walls. The house breathing around them. When they entered the bedroom, Wang paused. Looked around. At their life. Books. Photos. The chair by the window. The bed. Normal things. Suddenly changed. Yewande noticed him standing still. What? He shook his head slightly. Nothing. That is not nothing. He smiled. It just feels different now. She understood. Because she felt it too. The room had become something else. Not just theirs. Beginning to belong to someone new. She changed slowly. Washed her face. Removed her earrings. Watched herself in the mirror. The same woman. And not. She touched her stomach again. Small. Private. Real. When she turned back toward the room, Wang was already in bed. Watching her. He lifted the blanket. Silent invitation. She smiled. Climbed in beside him. He pulled her close immediately. Instinctively. Like breathing. They lay there. The dark soft around them. His hand resting over hers again. Both of them over the place where their future had quietly begun. And sometime after midnight, while Chicago shimmered outside and winter pressed against the windows, they fell asleep holding each other. And for the first time in 7 months, nothing in the house was at war. Morning came slowly. Not with urgency. Not with interruption. Just pale light slipping through the curtains in thin bands across the bedroom floor. Yewande woke first. For a moment she did not move. She lay still beneath the blankets, listening. The house. Quiet. Heat humming softly through the vents. A distant car outside. Wang's breathing beside her. Deep. Even. She turned her head slightly. He was still asleep. One arm stretched across the bed toward her even in sleep, fingers resting lightly against her waist, as though some part of him remained aware of where she was at all times. She watched him. The lines in his face softer now. Less guarded. The strain of the last 2 days not gone, but loosened. She wondered when he had last slept without holding tension somewhere inside his shoulders. Maybe not for months. Maybe longer. Her hand moved again to her stomach. Still instinctive. Still quiet. She smiled to herself. Then carefully slipped from bed. The hardwood floor cool beneath her feet. She wrapped herself in a robe and went downstairs. The house felt unfamiliar in the gentlest way. Like a place after a storm. Still standing. Different air. She opened the curtains in the living room. Chicago morning spread gray-blue beyond the glass. Cold rooftops. Steam rising from nearby buildings. The city waking. She stood there for a moment, then moved toward the kitchen. Halfway there she stopped. Something was sitting on the counter. A vase. White ceramic. Simple. Fresh flowers. Peonies. Soft blush pink. She frowned slightly. Walked closer. A folded note leaned against the vase. Her name. Handwritten. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Mong. Yewande stood still for a moment before picking it up. The paper was thick. Cream-colored. Carefully folded. She opened it. The handwriting was precise. Still controlled. But not rigid. The words read, I do not know how to begin differently yet. So I am beginning simply. Thank you for telling me the truth yesterday. Thank you for not allowing me to remain inside a lie I mistook for love. I know flowers are insufficient. I know words are insufficient. But they're what I have this morning. I've spent much of my life believing strength meant certainty. You showed me yesterday that strength may also mean being willing to discover you were wrong. I do not know how to be this version of myself yet, but I intend to learn. Please take care of yourself. And of my grandchild. Mong. Yewande read it twice, then folded it again slowly. She looked at the flowers. Not forgiveness. Not repair. But effort. The first honest thing Mong had ever offered her without agenda. Footsteps behind her.
Wang.
She turned. He stood in the doorway. Hair slightly messy. Still waking. He looked at her face. Then the flowers. Then the note. She came by. She must have. He walked closer. Yewande handed him the letter. He read it quietly. Very still. When he finished, he lowered the paper slowly. For a moment he said nothing. Then, she has never written me a letter in her life. Yewande looked at him. She probably could not say it out loud. He nodded. His eyes moved to the flowers. Something unreadable crossing his face. Not sadness. Something gentler. Relief, perhaps. Or the cautious beginning of hope. She is trying, he said quietly. Yes. He looked at her. Do you believe her? Yewande considered the question honestly. Then nodded once. Yes. Why? Because this does not sound like performance. She touched the folded paper lightly. It sounds unfamiliar to her. He smiled faintly. That may be the most honest thing she has ever done. He came to stand beside her. They looked at the flowers together. Morning light filling the kitchen. The vase glowing softly against the marble countertop. A small offering. A fragile bridge. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Wang looked at her. What do you want today? She turned. Today? Yes. No crises. No strategy. No people needing things. He reached for her hand. Just today. She smiled. I want breakfast. Reasonable. I want pancakes. Specific. And I want to sit somewhere near water. He nodded seriously. We can do that. And I want to buy one thing. What? She smiled slowly. A tiny pair of socks. Wang stared at her, then laughed quietly. The sound warm, real. He touched her cheek. Dangerous woman. Always. He kissed her forehead. Get dressed. Where are we going? You said water. He smiled. I know a place. An hour later they left the house. She wore a long cream sweater dress and boots. He wore dark jeans and a wool coat. Simple. Unremarkable. They walked out together. The cold hit immediately. Sharp air. Chicago winter pressing against skin. Wang reached for her hand automatically. She let him. They drove north along the lake. Music low. Traffic light. The city sliding past in familiar rhythm. She watched the skyline through the window. The morning pale and silver. Everything looking newly washed. Wang drove with one hand, the other resting loosely over hers on the center console. No urgency. No phone calls. No interruptions. Just movement. Just breathing. Just them. When they reached the lakefront cafe, it was quiet. Large windows. Soft light. People reading newspapers. Steam rising from coffee cups. They found a table near the glass. Lake Michigan stretched beyond. Gray and endless. The horizon blurred into winter sky. Yewande sat looking out at the water. Wang watched her more than the view. What? She asked. Nothing. That is twice in 12 hours. He smiled. I like looking at you. You see me every day. I know. And it still feels lucky. She looked down briefly, then back up. The warmth in her expression small but unmistakable. Their coffee arrived. Pancakes. Fruit.
Tea.
Simple things. They ate slowly. No rush. No performance. Just the quiet intimacy of people who had survived something difficult and found themselves still sitting at the same table afterward. And halfway through breakfast, Yewande looked out at the lake and thought, This is what building looks like. Not grand gestures. Not perfect healing. Just choosing again.
And again.
And again. The same person. The same life. The same love. Until it becomes the shape of everything. After breakfast, they walked along the lake. The cold had sharpened. Wind moved across the water in long, clean sweeps. People passed bundled in scarves and heavy coats, shoulders tucked against winter. Wang kept one hand in his pocket and the other around Yewande's gloved fingers. The path curved beside the shoreline. Lake Michigan stretched beside them like brushed steel.
Gray.
Endless. Quiet in its own enormous way. Yewande walked slowly. Not because she was tired, because she did not want to rush this morning. She looked out over the water. You know, she said, when I was a child, I used to think cities near water were more honest. Wang glanced at her. Why? Because water tells the truth about weather. He smiled slightly. That sounds like something you have believed for a long time. I have. She tucked a loose curl behind her ear. Places without water can pretend longer. He looked toward the lake. And Chicago?
She thought about it.
This city never pretends to be soft. He laughed quietly. That may be why you like it. Probably. They kept walking. A gull passed overhead. Farther down the path, a man jogged past with headphones on, breath visible in the air. Normal life. Ordinary movement. The world continuing. Wang slowed slightly. There's a shop ahead. What kind of shop? You said socks. She smiled immediately. You remembered. I remember everything you say. That is dangerous. It has served me well. They crossed the street. A small children's boutique sat tucked between a bookstore and a bakery. Warm light glowed through the windows. Tiny clothes displayed on wooden racks. Small shoes. Blankets. Soft neutral colors. Yewande paused outside the window. For a second she just looked. Something changed in her expression. Not hesitation. Recognition. This was becoming real in increments.
A test.
A conversation. A hand resting unconsciously against her stomach. And now this. A store filled with evidence that soon there would be someone else. Wang watched her quietly. You okay? She nodded. Yes. But her voice came softer than before. They stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around them immediately. Soft music played overhead. The air smelled faintly like lavender and cotton. Yewande moved slowly through the aisles. Her fingers brushing fabrics. Tiny sweaters. Small hats. Things impossibly small. She stopped in front of a display. Baby socks. Folded in neat rows.
Cream. Gray.
Soft yellow. Tiny enough to fit in her palm. She picked up one pair. Looked at them. Then smiled. Not the smile she gave other people. Not the practiced one. Something quieter. Private. Wang stood beside her. He looked down at the socks. Then at her face. You're crying. She blinked. Touched beneath one eye. She had not noticed. Apparently. He smiled gently. Are they happy tears? She looked down again. Yes. A pause. And terrified tears. That seems reasonable. She laughed softly. Everything suddenly feels very real. It is real. She nodded. I know. She looked at the socks again. These are absurdly small. They are. How does a person begin this?
What?
Becoming someone's mother. Wang answered without hesitation. The same way you became everything else. She looked at him.
How?
One careful decision at a time. The words settled inside her. Because he knew her. Not romantically. Not ideally. Actually, he knew how she built things. How she moved through uncertainty. Not by grand confidence. By deliberate steps. She placed the socks gently into the basket. Then added a soft knit blanket. Then stopped herself. We should not buy too much. Why? Because it is early. He nodded. Understanding immediately. Hope still carried caution. Not fear. Just tenderness. They moved toward the register. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly. First baby. Yewande looked briefly at Wang. Then back. Yes. The word felt different spoken aloud. The woman smiled wider. Congratulations. Thank you. The bag felt strangely important in her hand when they left. Small.
Light. Meaning everything.
They walked back toward the car. The wind stronger now. Wang opened her door, waited until she sat,
Closed it gently.
He came around to his side, started the car. For a while neither of them spoke. The heater hummed softly. Traffic moved outside. Yewande looked down at the shopping bag resting in her lap, then reached inside, pulled out the tiny socks again. She held them, turning them over in her hands. Wang glanced over. You really like those socks? She smiled faintly. They make it impossible to pretend this is theoretical. He drove quietly for another minute, then said, My father used to keep one pair of my baby shoes. She looked at him. In his office. You never told me that. I forgot about it until now. He looked ahead at the road. They sat on a shelf behind his desk. Why? He said they reminded him that people begin small. Yewande smiled softly. That sounds like him. It does. He was quiet. Then, I think I understand him more lately. She watched him. Because of everything? Yes. A pause. And because of this. His hand moved from the steering wheel, rested briefly over hers. Over the bag. I understand why people become softer. She looked at him carefully. You're soft. He smiled faintly.
No.
Yes. I am selective. You are soft with me. He glanced over. That is because you are mine. She raised an eyebrow. That sounded territorial.
It was.
She laughed. He smiled too. The city passed around them. Buildings. Traffic lights. Winter trees bare against the pale sky. And as they drove home, Yewande leaned her head lightly against the window and watched Chicago blur by. Her hand resting over the small paper bag. Over the socks. Over the future. And for the first time since she had seen those two lines, she let herself imagine something fully. A nursery. Late nights. Small footsteps. Laughter in hallways. Wang carrying a sleepy child downstairs in the morning. Tiny hands. Tiny voice. Life expanding quietly around them. She closed her eyes briefly. And smiled. Because for the first time in a very long time, she was not imagining survival. She was imagining what came after. When they arrived home, the house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt lived in.
Softened.
The afternoon light slanted through the windows in long pale strips, touching the floors, the bookshelves, the framed photographs that lined the hallway. Wang unlocked the door. Yewande stepped inside first. Warmth met them. The familiar scent of cedar, coffee, and the faint trace of paint from the kitchen walls they had redone together 2 summers ago. She paused automatically. Not because something was wrong. Because she was listening. The house had become something she listened to lately. Its mood. Its silence. Today it breathed differently. Safe. Wang took her coat. Hung it beside his. She still held the small shopping bag. The socks inside. The blanket. Proof. He glanced at it. You are carrying that like it contains state secrets. It does. He smiled. Fair. She walked into the living room. Sunlight touched the arm of the sofa. The same sofa where she had cried alone more than once over the last 7 months. The same room where silence had sometimes felt sharp. Now it looked ordinary again. And ordinary suddenly felt precious. She sat down slowly, the bag beside her. Wang disappeared briefly toward the kitchen. She heard cabinets open, water running, then the sound of the kettle being filled. Domestic sounds. Small. Grounding. She leaned back, closed her eyes for a second. Her body felt heavy in a pleasant way. Not exhaustion. Release. After a moment, Wang returned carrying 2 mugs. Tea for her. Coffee for himself. He handed hers carefully. She accepted it, warm against her palms. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. They drank quietly. Outside, a faint layer of snow had begun falling. Small flakes. Slow. The city softening under it. Yewande watched through the window. It's snowing. Wang followed her gaze. It always snows when something changes. She looked at him. That sounds suspiciously poetic for you. I contain hidden dimensions. You contain spreadsheets. He smiled. And deep emotional complexity. She laughed softly. Debatable. He leaned his head briefly against hers. The room quiet around them. Then, after a while, he said, "We should tell people." She looked at him. "Not everyone."
No.
He nodded. "Just the people who belong to it." She understood immediately. Not public.
Not yet.
This was still fragile. Still theirs.
Mrs. Han, she said.
Yes. And your mother? He was quiet. A small pause. Then, yes. She watched him carefully. You're ready for that? I think she deserves to hear it from us. Not punishment. Not distance. A bridge. Careful. Measured. She nodded. That feels right. He looked down at his coffee. Then back up. She will cry again. Probably. She rarely cries. I noticed. She thinks it is loss of control. Yewande smiled faintly. Today may have adjusted that theory. He smiled too. Then silence again. Comfortable. She rested her head against the back of the sofa, the tea warming her hands. After several minutes, Wang spoke again. What were you thinking in the store? She looked at him. When you held the socks. She smiled softly. That life is strange. That is broad. I know. She looked toward the window. At one point this year, I genuinely wondered if I would survive being in this house. His expression shifted immediately. She felt it. Not defensiveness.
Pain.
I know, he said quietly. No, she said gently. You know now.
He looked down.
She reached for his hand. I am not saying it to punish you. I still should have seen faster. You should have. He nodded once. Accepted. No argument.
She appreciated that.
She squeezed his fingers. But I also stayed. He looked at her. You did. I stayed because even when things were bad, I never doubted us. The room softened. His thumb moved slowly across her hand. I doubted myself, he admitted. She looked at him. In what way? In whether I could protect both things. What things? You. And my mother. The honesty sat plainly between them. No performance. No defense. Just truth. I thought if I moved too quickly, I would lose one of you. Yewande listened quietly. And I realized too late that trying not to lose anyone almost cost me the person I could not afford to lose. Her eyes held his. He rarely spoke this plainly. When he did, she listened carefully. You know what I think, she said softly. What? I think you spent your whole life believing love means responsibility. He watched her. And now you are learning that love also requires choice. He was quiet, the words landing, because they were true. He had always carried people, protected, managed, held structures together. But choice was different. Choice required risk. She touched his face lightly. You chose. He nodded. Yes. And I saw it. He leaned into her touch. Small. Unconscious. Then he smiled faintly. You always see too much. That is why you married me. That is exactly why I married you. She smiled. Outside, snow continued falling. The room growing dimmer as afternoon slipped toward evening. The house wrapped around them.
Warm. Still.
And after a while, one looked around the living room thoughtfully. What? He glanced toward the hallway. We need to decide where the nursery goes. She laughed softly. You really are moving quickly. I run a global organization. Yes. I understand logistics. This is not logistics. What is it? She smiled. This is hope. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled back. Slowly. Yes, he said quietly. It is. That evening, they ate dinner in the kitchen. Nothing elaborate.
Soup.
Bread warmed in the oven. A salad Yewande barely touched because suddenly she only wanted oranges and salt. One watched her sprinkle salt onto orange slices with visible confusion. You've never eaten that before. I know. And yet you are eating it like it contains answers. It might. He leaned back slightly in his chair. I have entered unfamiliar territory. You manage criminal networks. Yes. I understand power structures. She lifted another orange slice. But this is biology. He nodded seriously. Far more unpredictable. She laughed. The sound lingered in the kitchen.
Soft.
Easy. After dinner, they cleaned together. The way they always had. Without discussion. Without assigning tasks.
He washed. She dried.
Movement practiced from repetition. Hands brushing occasionally. Small touches. The kind that happened when intimacy had become ordinary. At one point, she stood on her toes to place a plate on the top shelf. Wang reached automatically to steady her waist. She glanced back. You think I am fragile now?
No.
You definitely do. I think you are carrying something important. So am I. He smiled slightly. Yes. She placed the dish away, turned toward him. And I am still me. I know. You cannot become overprotective. I absolutely can. You cannot. He dried his hands, looked at her carefully. You are asking me not to become protective while you are carrying my child. Our child. Our child. He corrected immediately. She smiled. Better. He stepped closer, one hand resting lightly at her waist. I am not going to smother you. Good. I am just going to monitor stairs. She laughed. Monitor stairs? Yes. That sounds deeply unreasonable. It sounds responsible. It sounds like paranoia. It sounds like excellent husband behavior. She shook her head. Dangerous man. You married me willingly. Questionable judgment on my part. He smiled, then kissed her forehead.
Slow.
Familiar. When the kitchen was clean, they moved into the living room again. Snow had thickened outside. The city quieter now. Streetlights glowing gold through white air. Yewande curled into the corner of the sofa, blanket over her legs. Wang sat beside her. Laptop open briefly. Emails. Messages. The unavoidable machinery of his world. But after 15 minutes he closed it, without answering half of what waited. She noticed. You ignored work. I postponed work. Voluntarily. Yes. She raised an eyebrow. Should I document this? It is a historic event. He set the laptop aside, turned toward her. What are you thinking? She looked toward the fire. Low flames moving behind glass. That everything feels fragile. His expression softened. Fragile how? Not bad fragile. She searched for the words. Important fragile. He listened. The kind where you realize something matters enough to lose. The room grew quieter. He understood immediately, because that was his language too.
Risk. Value. Cost.
He shifted closer, his hand finding hers beneath the blanket. You do not have to be afraid alone. She looked at him. I know. He kissed her knuckles. You rarely let people carry fear with you. She smiled faintly. That is because most people panic. I do not panic.
No.
You plan. Yes. You weaponize calm. She laughed softly. That sounds aggressive. It is admiration. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. The firelight moved across the room, shadows shifting slowly against walls. After a while, he said quietly, What kind of mother do you think you will be? She was silent for a moment, thinking. Present. He nodded. That matters. I think I will be strict. You are definitely going to be strict. She smiled, but soft underneath. You are already soft underneath. Selective softness. He smiled. There it is. She looked toward the flames. I want our child to feel safe telling us who they are. He listened carefully, not performing, not earning love. Just known. The words settled.
Known.
Wang looked down, thinking. My father did that well. Yes. He made space. She nodded.
He did.
He was quiet. Then, my mother loved through fear. Yewande looked at him. And your father loved through steadiness. Yes.
He considered that.
I think I want to be somewhere between them. You will be. He looked at her. You sound certain. I am. Why? Because you question yourself.
He frowned slightly.
That inspires confidence? Yes. She turned toward him. People who think they already know exactly how to love rarely improve. The fire crackled softly. He absorbed that, then smiled faintly. You always make things sound wiser than they should. I am deeply gifted. He laughed quietly. She loved that sound. Not loud, not careless, earned. Later, when the fire had burned low and the snow outside thickened into silence, they went upstairs. The bedroom glowed softly in lamplight. Yewande changed into one of his old shirts, the fabric soft from years of washing. He watched her from the bed. You steal all my clothes. They are comfortable. They are mine. Marriage redistributed ownership. He smiled. Convenient interpretation. She climbed into bed, settled beneath the blankets. He joined her moments later, the room dark except for the city glow beyond the curtains. He turned toward her immediately, one arm wrapping around her waist, his hand resting instinctively against her stomach again, the gesture already becoming habit. She lay there quietly, feeling the warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the safety of shared silence. Then softly, almost sleepily, she said, Do you think it will be a girl or a boy? He thought for a moment. I don't know. No instinct. He smiled faintly against her hair.
No.
You. She closed her eyes. A girl. He smiled. Why? I don't know. She paused. Maybe because I know how to raise a girl who takes up space. He kissed the top of her head. And if it is a boy? She smiled. Then we teach him how to make space. The room grew still again. Outside, snow fell steadily across Chicago. Quiet, persistent, covering rooftops, softening edges. And inside the dark warmth of the bedroom, they fell asleep talking quietly about names they would never choose and futures they had only just begun to imagine. Sometime after midnight, Yewande woke. Not abruptly.
Just slowly.
The way sleep loosens its hold when something small changes in the body. The room was dark except for the muted silver glow of snowlight reflecting through the curtains. For a moment she stayed still, listening. Wang's arm was heavy across her waist, his breathing deep, even. The city quieter now beneath winter. She shifted slightly. A strange feeling moved through her. Not pain, not discomfort exactly, just awareness. A different kind of fullness. Her body no longer entirely private. She lay there with one hand resting lightly over her stomach. Still flat. Still impossible to see. And yet she could not stop touching that place. As if contact made it real, in a language words could not. Beside her, Wang stirred. His eyes opened halfway.
Sleep heavy.
You okay? His voice rough with sleep. Yes. You moved. You notice everything. I notice you. She smiled faintly. Go back to sleep. Instead, he shifted closer. His hand slid over hers. Resting there. Together. You're awake. So are you. He exhaled quietly. Neither of them moved. The dark wrapped softly around them. After a while, he said, I had a dream. She turned slightly. What about? He hesitated, then smiled faintly. I was carrying a baby through this house. Her expression softened immediately. And they would not stop crying. She laughed quietly. Already overwhelmed? I was calm. Of course you were. But I had no idea what I was doing. That sounds accurate. He smiled into the darkness. I kept walking room to room like the right room would solve it. She smiled. And did it?
No.
What happened? You took the baby from me. She laughed softly again. And they stopped crying immediately. She turned toward him. That feels unfair. It felt realistic. She nudged him lightly. He smiled. Then his expression softened again. I think I am scared. The honesty sat quietly between them. Not dramatic. Just true. She looked at him carefully. Of what?
He thought about it.
Doing it wrong. You will. He blinked. That was immediate. She smiled gently. We both will. He was quiet. She touched his face. No one gets this perfectly. He looked at her. You sound very calm about that. I built a business from uncertainty. She shrugged slightly beneath the blankets. I trust adjustment. He watched her. The snowlight touching part of her face. Soft silver against dark skin. The familiar shape of her in darkness. I do not think you are afraid of much. She smiled slightly. That is because you met me after I learned how to carry fear without showing it. He absorbed that, then asked quietly, what scares you? She was silent for longer this time, thinking honestly. Losing myself. He frowned slightly. In motherhood? In responsibility. She looked toward the ceiling. I've spent my whole life building who I am. Her voice quiet, measured. I do not want to disappear into being needed. He listened carefully. She knew he would. I want to love this child completely. She looked back at him. But I do not want to stop existing as myself. He nodded slowly, understanding immediately. Not judging, just understanding. You won't. She looked at him. You sound certain. I am. Why? Because you do not know how to become smaller. She smiled faintly. There it is again. It is true. He brushed her hair gently back from her face. You love too intentionally for that. The room remained still around them. She watched him. This man. This careful, observant man who noticed when she shifted in sleep. Who carried fear quietly. Who loved with steadiness. Do you know something strange? She asked. What? I think you will be softer as a father than you realize. He smiled faintly. You keep saying I am soft. You are. I disagree. You protect things gently. That is strategy.
No.
She shook her head slightly. That is tenderness disguised as control. He laughed quietly beneath his breath. That sounds like psychoanalysis. It is. Should I be concerned? Always. He smiled, then leaned forward and kissed her slowly.
Sleepy. Warm.
The kind of kiss that belonged only to late-night honesty. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. The words came easily now, not because they mattered less, because they had become part of the architecture between them. I know. You always say that. Because you always mean it. He smiled slightly. Yes. She touched his cheek. I love you too. Outside, snow continued falling. Soft against rooftops. Against windows. Against the sleeping city. Inside the room, they settled back into the blankets. Closer now, her head against his chest. His hand resting protectively over hers. And slowly, gently, sleep returned. The kind that comes when nothing inside you is fighting anymore. The next morning arrived bright. Snowlight filled the house before the sun fully rose. The world outside looked softened. Covered. Chicago transformed overnight into something quieter. Yewande woke to stillness. For a second she did not know why the room felt different. Then she remembered. The baby. The conversation. The strange, peaceful ache that had settled into the center of her life. She blinked awake slowly. One was already gone from bed. The space beside her warm but empty. She listened. Voices downstairs.
Low. Male.
She frowned slightly. Not alarmed. Just curious. She slipped from bed. Wrapped herself in a robe. Walked toward the hallway. The house smelled like coffee. And something sweet. Bread maybe. She moved quietly down the stairs. Halfway down she stopped. Wang stood in the kitchen. Back to her. Phone pressed between shoulder and ear. One hand stirring something on the stove. He was barefoot. Still in sleep clothes. Completely unaware she was watching. She stayed where she was. Listening. No, he said calmly. Push the meeting to tomorrow.
Pause.
I do not care what the board thinks. Another pause.
No.
Tell them I said tomorrow. He stirred again. Steam rising. His tone shifted slightly. Lower. More dangerous. The version of him the organization knew. If they disagree, they can speak to me directly. Silence. Then, good. He ended the call. set the phone down, exhaled, and only then noticed her standing there. His face changed immediately, the hardness gone in seconds. "You're awake." She smiled. "You threatened people before breakfast." I reorganized priorities. That sounded expensive. It probably was. She descended the rest of the stairs, moved into the kitchen.
Warm. Bright.
Snowlight reflecting through every window. She looked toward the stove. "What are you making?" He hesitated. She narrowed her eyes. "That expression concerns me." "I attempted pancakes." Attempted? There were setbacks. She looked into the pan. One pancake. Misshapen. Slightly burned. She looked back at him. "This looks emotional. It is structurally unsound." She laughed. "Why didn't you wait for me?" "Because you were sleeping. And you needed rest." She leaned lightly against the counter, watching him. "You made breakfast." "I tried." "That counts." He glanced at her. "You are being unusually generous." "You made effort." He smiled faintly, then looked at her more closely. "How do you feel?" She considered. "Hungry." "That is encouraging." "And slightly overwhelmed." He nodded. "That also seems reasonable." She moved closer, stood beside him. He wrapped one arm loosely around her waist without thinking, his body already learning new habits. Automatic protection. Automatic closeness. She rested against him, looked out the window. Snow layered thick across the backyard, the trees bare and white, the world muted. "It looks peaceful." "It is." He flipped another pancake. This one survived better. Progress. She watched him quietly, then said, "You canceled your meeting." "Yes." "Important." "Yes." She looked up at him. "You never cancel important things." He turned off the stove,
Placed the spatula down.
then looked at her directly. "You are important." The answer came so simply, so immediately. It landed deeper because of that. She held his gaze. No dramatics. No performance. Just truth. She touched his jaw lightly. Dangerous answer. Accurate answer. He kissed her forehead, then plated the pancakes. They sat at the kitchen table. Coffee for him. Tea for her. The pancakes slightly uneven but edible. She cut into one. Took a bite. He watched carefully, waiting. She chewed thoughtfully, then nodded once. "These are acceptable." "Acceptable? Do not become arrogant." He smiled. "You are difficult to impress. You prefer challenge." "That is true." They ate slowly. Snow outside. Warm kitchen. Morning unfolding without urgency. After a while, one leaned back slightly. "I spoke to my mother." She looked up. "When?" "Early." "How was she?" He considered. "Quiet." "That sounds significant." "It is." He looked down briefly. "She asked how you were feeling." Yewande paused. "And I told her you were good." A small silence. "She asked if you were eating enough." Yewande smiled faintly. "That sounds like progress." He nodded. "She wanted to know if you still liked oranges." Yewande laughed softly. She remembered? She notices more than she admits. The room softened. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. Movement.
Slow.
Careful. Possible. Wang watched her. "She wants to send soup." Yewande raised an eyebrow. "Soup? Korean soup? That feels maternal." "It is." She smiled slightly. "Tell her yes." He looked at her. "You mean that?" "Yes." He studied her face. "You are kinder than most people."
No.
She shook her head. "I just understand that people become different when they are given a place to return to." He absorbed that quietly. Because she meant it. Because she always meant things fully. He reached across the table, took her hand, held it there between them, the morning stretching gently around them. And for a while, neither of them said anything. They simply sat together, snow falling, tea cooling, hands joined across the table, learning the shape of this new version of their life. Slowly, deliberately, the way all meaningful things are built. Later that afternoon, the snow stopped. The city emerged slowly from white. Cars carved careful paths through streets. Footprints appeared along sidewalks. Chicago returning to movement. Inside the house, warmth held. Yewande sat in the study. One of Wang's oversized sweaters wrapped around her. Laptop open. Emails waiting. Her company did not stop because her life had shifted. 3 missed calls. 12 unread messages. 2 pending contracts. A budget review. She stared at the screen, then smiled faintly, because for the first time in years, work did not feel like the center of her gravity. Important. Still hers. But not the only thing holding her. She rested one hand against her stomach again. A habit now. Then answered 3 emails. Rejected 1 proposal. Approved a funding timeline. Scheduled a call for Thursday. Efficient. Focused. Still herself. The study door opened quietly. Wang leaned against the frame, watching her. You are working. I own a company. You are supposed to be resting. She looked up. There it is. What? Protective overreach. He entered.
Coffee in his hand.
Tea in hers. He set her mug down beside the laptop. You have been in here an hour. That is not excessive. It is when you forget to stand up. She looked at him. You timed me, I observed. You monitored. I care. She smiled despite herself. He moved behind her chair, hands settling lightly onto her shoulders. Slow pressure. Massage. Her eyes closed briefly. That is manipulative. It is effective. She relaxed despite intention. His thumbs pressed gently into tension she had not realized she was holding. You carry stress in your shoulders. I carry everything in my shoulders. I know. The room quieted. Soft afternoon light across bookshelves. Snow glare reflecting through the windows. He continued massaging slowly. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then he said, I was thinking about names. She opened one eye. That was fast. I plan. You obsess. Strategic preparation. She smiled faintly. What names? I do not know yet. Then what exactly were you thinking? That we should not choose something fragile. She turned slightly. Fragile. A name people can reduce. She studied him. You have thought about this more than is reasonable. Yes. He did not deny it. She laughed softly. What kind of names do you like? He thought. Strong names. That means nothing. It means presence. She turned fully now, facing him. What does presence sound like to you? He considered carefully. Then, something that enters a room and belongs there. The answer made her smile. Because of course. Because everything in his world was about belonging.
Claim.
Position. Identity. And you? He asked. What kind of names do you like? She thought for a moment. Names with softness inside strength. He nodded slowly. That sounds like you. She smiled. Maybe. He leaned down, kissed the top of her head, then glanced at her laptop. You are still working. You are still hovering. I am supervising. You are impossible. I am attentive. She closed the laptop deliberately. There. He looked pleased. Excellent decision. You manipulated me into stopping. Yes. Dangerous man. You married me voluntarily. Questionable life choice. He smiled, then held out his hand. She looked at it. What? Come with me. Where? Upstairs. She narrowed her eyes slightly. That sounds suspicious. It is not suspicious. You look suspicious. I am offended. You are never offended. That is true. She stood anyway, placed her hand in his. He led her upstairs, down the hallway, past their bedroom, toward the far end of the second floor, a room rarely used. The door opened. Yewande stepped inside.
Stopped.
The room was empty except for a bookshelf and an armchair. Soft afternoon light filled it. Large windows overlooking the backyard. Snow resting across tree branches.
Quiet. Still.
She looked around, then back at him. What is this? He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. I think this should be the nursery. She turned slowly again, taking it in. The windows, the light, the space. The room felt calm. like somewhere mornings would happen gently. She walked farther inside, her fingers brushing the windowsill. She looked out at the snow, then around again. It gets the best light. Yes. You already thought about that. Yes. She smiled softly. Of course he had. He watched her carefully. What do you think? She looked around one more time, imagining a crib,
Books.
soft blankets, tiny clothes.
Life.
I think, she said quietly, that this room feels hopeful. He nodded. That was my thought too. She moved toward the center of the room,
Slowly.
standing there, letting herself picture it. Not abstract anymore. Not future in theory. A place.
A room.
A beginning. Wang came to stand behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting lightly against her shoulder. Together they looked out at the snow-covered yard. And for a long moment neither of them said anything. Because some moments become important precisely because nobody rushes to fill them. After a while, Yewande said softly, I used to think building meant fighting for every inch. He listened. And now, she leaned back into him. Now I think building also means allowing good things to exist without apologizing for them. His arms tightened slightly around her. Yes, he said quietly. I think you're right. The room stayed silent, light pooling softly across the floor, the world outside white and still. And inside the empty room that would someday belong to someone small and entirely loved, they stood together imagining a future neither of them had ever fully allowed themselves to expect. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. I love you, besties. See you very soon.